Since childhood, Nia lived in her sister Amina's shadow. Amina was perfect in everyone's eyes, top grades, shiny medals, a father's endless praise. Every time she walked into a room, people smiled. When Nia entered, silence followed. Their father would pat Amina's head and call her my pride, then glance at Nia and say, "You should learn from your sister." At the dinner table, Nia ate her food quietly, feeling like every bite was a test she could never pass. When Amina got accepted into a top university, their father threw a big celebration with music and guests. But when Nia won an art scholarship, something she worked for day and night, he only said, "That's nothing compared to your sister." Years passed. The sisters grew up, each chasing her own life. One day, their father collapsed suddenly. At the hospital, doctors said he needed a transplant, but they first needed to find a family match. The DNA tests came back, and what they revealed shocked everyone. Amina, the golden child, wasn't his biological daughter. Nia was. The daughter he ignored, the one he never believed in, was the only one who could save his life. When he looked at her, tears filled his eyes for the first time. Nia didn't say a word. She just signed the papers to help him. In that quiet moment, the truth spoke louder than every insult he had ever thrown. Love had always belonged to the forgotten daughter. All her life, Nia lived in her sister Amina's shadow. Amina was the star of the family, beautiful, talented, and their father's favorite. He never missed her piano recitals, even if they were hours away. But when Nia was in a school play, he didn't bother to come. He'd say, "Plays are for fun, not for smart people." At dinner, he'd ask Amina about her grades, her future, her dreams. But when Nia spoke, he barely looked up from his phone. Still, Nia smiled. She learned early that love wasn't something you could beg for. Years later, Amina went off to study abroad. Their father bragged to everyone about her. Nia, meanwhile, quietly opened a small cafe on a street corner. She decorated it herself, painted the walls, baked the muffins, and served customers with a smile. Her father laughed when he heard. "A coffee shop? That's not success, Nia. You should be more like your sister." His words stung, but Nia didn't argue. She just kept working. One cafe turned into 2, then 5, then 10. Within a few years, her name became known across the city. Nia's brew was everywhere. Then one rainy evening, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, she saw him, her father, looking smaller than she remembered. His business had gone bankrupt. Amina had cut ties after a scandal abroad. The man who once looked down on Nia now stood before her, desperate and broken. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, avoiding her eyes. "I was wrong about you. You've done well. I'm proud of you." Nia looked at him for a long moment. Her heart ached, but not from anger, from everything she had once wished for. She invited him in and handed him a warm cup of coffee. Then she picked up an envelope from the table and passed it to him. "You should see this," she said softly. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a DNA report. His eyes widened as he read. Amina, the daughter he had adored, the one he built his whole pride around, wasn't his biological child. Nia was. He looked at her, speechless. I didn't know," he whispered. Nia smiled gently. "You never had to be proud of me," she said. "You just had to love me." Tears filled his eyes. For the first time, he saw her not as the daughter he compared, but as the one who never stopped loving him, even when he gave her every reason not to. As he sat there, holding the truth in his shaking hands, Nia felt a quiet peace. She had spent her whole life trying to earn his love, but now she realized she didn't need to. She had already built her own worth, one cup of coffee at a time. Since childhood, Nia learned what it felt like to be forgotten. On every birthday, her sister Amina got new dresses, perfumes, and shiny gold bracelets that sparkled under the lights. Nia got whatever was left behind: old clothes, used toys, and the words, "You should be grateful." She never complained. She just smiled, even when it hurt. While Amina soaked in attention, Nia stayed quiet in the corners, sketching flowers on scraps of paper and helping her mother in the kitchen. Her father never noticed her soft kindness. He only saw what she lacked: trophies, perfect grades, the loud kind of success that he could brag about. When their mother fell sick, everything changed. Amina cried for a week and then disappeared with her father's money, promising to return. She never did. Nia stayed. She cooked, cleaned, and took care of her father through every long night of grief. When her mother took her final breath, Nia held her hand until it grew cold. Her father didn't say thank you. He only stared at the wall, murmuring Amina's name like a prayer. Years passed. Nia built a quiet life, working hard, painting in her free time and visiting her father every week. He had grown old, lonely, and bitter, still waiting for Amina to come home. One afternoon, a lawyer showed up at Nia's door holding a folder. "Your mother's will," he said softly. Nia opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter written in her mother's handwriting, familiar, gentle, full of love. "To my true daughter, Nia," it read. "The one who carried love when others carried greed." Tears blurred Nia's eyes as she read it again and again. But the lawyer wasn't done. He handed her another envelope, a DNA report. The paper revealed something her mother must have known all along. Amina wasn't her father's biological child. Nia was. The man who spent his whole life comparing her to his golden daughter had been blind to his only real child. When Nia showed him the letter and report, he froze. His hands trembled as he read, his lips quivering. This can't be true," he whispered, but the truth stared back from the paper. His face went pale as memories rushed in, all the times he ignored Nia's love, all the moments she stood by him when no one else did. "I'm sorry," he said weakly, his voice breaking. Nia smiled through her tears. "It's okay, Dad," she said softly. "Mom already forgave you. So do I." For the first time he looked at her, really looked, and saw the love he had wasted years rejecting. And in that moment, he realized the greatest gift he ever had wasn't gold or glory. It was Nia, the daughter who never stopped loving him, even when he forgot how to love her back. At Amina's graduation, the auditorium was filled with flowers, flashing cameras, and proud parents. Their father stood tall at the podium, his voice booming with pride. "My daughter Amina," he said, smiling wide, "has made this family proud. She is the perfect example of hard work and excellence." The crowd clapped, Amina beamed, and Nia sat quietly in the back row. She clapped too, even though her palms ached. Her heart was heavy, but her smile never faded. When their father caught her eye, he nodded politely, the kind of look you give a stranger. A year later, it was Nia's big day, her first solo art exhibition. Her paintings filled the gallery, each one a piece of her soul. Her friends came, teachers came, even strangers stopped to admire her work. But her father's seat remained empty. She had sent him an invitation, though she knew he wouldn't come. "Art won't feed you," he had once said. "You should do something real like your sister." But destiny has a strange sense of humor. Among the visitors that evening was a journalist who recognized Nia's work. One painting, in particular, caught his attention, a shadowy portrait hidden behind bright colors. When he looked closer, he realized it was a depiction of a father and two daughters, one shining in light, the other fading in the background. It wasn't cruel or bitter, it was heartbreakingly honest. The journalist wrote about it, calling it a masterpiece born from pain. Days later, headlines exploded. Young artist's painting bought by Minister of Culture. Nia's name was everywhere. Her face was on TV, her art celebrated across the country. And suddenly her father appeared at her door, holding flowers, his eyes watery. "Nia," he said softly, "I'm proud of you. I was wrong. Let's start again." But life had one more truth waiting. During all the media attention, an old document surfaced, a paternity test from years ago. It turned out that Amina, his so-called brilliant daughter, wasn't his biological child. The test had been part of a visa process that Amina once applied for and then quietly buried. The news spread fast, and the same people who once praised his parenting now whispered behind his back. Nia didn't celebrate his humiliation. She didn't even mention the test. She simply said, "I never wanted revenge, Dad. I just wanted you to see me." He stood frozen, realizing that the daughter he ignored was the only one who had ever truly loved him, the one who never needed to prove herself. The painting that made her famous had already said everything. Nia didn't have to destroy him. The truth did that on its own. And as she walked back into her gallery that evening, surrounded by her art and quiet pride, Nia finally smiled, not for applause but for peace. The house was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of expensive flowers. It was Amina's engagement party, and their father was glowing with pride. Guests surrounded him, congratulating him on his perfect daughter. He raised his glass and said loudly, "Amina is the daughter every man dreams of marrying." Everyone clapped, and Amina smiled brightly, her diamond ring shining under the lights. In the corner, Nia stood quietly pouring drinks for the guests. She had helped decorate the hall, arrange the flowers, and even bake the cake. But no one noticed. She had learned long ago that her place in this family was invisible. Her father barely looked her way. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of pride was reserved for Amina. Still, Nia smiled politely, even when her heart felt heavy. The evening went smoothly until the groom's family arrived. They were polite at first, exchanging smiles and greetings, but soon a strange tension filled the air. The groom's father looked uncomfortable. His wife clutched an envelope in her hand. When the crowd settled, she finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We need to talk," she said, glancing at Amina and her father. "Before this engagement continues, there's something you should know." The room went silent. Everyone watched as she handed the envelope to Nia's father. Inside were documents, DNA results. The words on the paper changed everything. The groom and Amina were related, not closely, but enough to make the marriage impossible. The groom's real father, the report showed, was also Amina's biological father. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then came the gasps, the whispers, the chaos. Guests started murmuring, eyes wide with shock. Amina dropped her glass, her hands shaking. Their father's face went pale. He stumbled backward, whispering, "No, no, this can't be true." But the proof was right there in black and white. The golden daughter he had adored all his life wasn't his child. The truth shattered everything he believed. In the middle of the chaos, Nia stood still. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched quietly as the man who had once ignored her broke down in front of everyone. For years, she had lived in Amina's shadow, hearing her father say, "Why can't you be more like her?" Now, for the first time, he couldn't even look her in the eye. That night, long after the guests had left and the lights were turned off, there was a knock on Nia's door. Her father stood there, eyes red, his voice shaking. "Nia," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I was blind. I failed you." She didn't speak right away. Then she handed him a small envelope, the same kind that had destroyed his pride hours earlier. "I know," she said softly. "This is the DNA test I took months ago. I'm your real daughter. I was your family all along. You just never looked." He broke down crying, and for the first time, Nia didn't feel invisible, she felt seen. When their father fell sick, everything changed. He had always been strong, loud, and proud, the kind of man who never admitted weakness. But now he lay in a hospital bed, pale and quiet, surrounded by the soft hum of machines. Amina, his favorite daughter, didn't come. She sent short texts and excuses instead. "She's busy," he told everyone. "She has an important job, she'll visit soon." But she never did. It was Nia, the daughter he never noticed, who showed up every day. She brought home-cooked soup, sat by his bedside, and read him the newspaper. When the bills piled up, she sold her paintings, the ones she had spent years creating. Her art was her heart, but she didn't hesitate. She just wanted him to get better. Still, he barely looked at her. His pride wouldn't let him say thank you. One night, the rain was falling hard outside. Nia had dozed off in the chair next to him, her head resting on her arm. A nurse walked in quietly, holding a folder. She checked the papers and then froze. Her eyes darted between Nia and the sleeping man in the bed. "Miss," she whispered, gently shaking Nia awake, I think there's been a mistake." Nia blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "These are the genetic test results," the nurse said carefully, "for the transplant compatibility test. The patient doesn't share DNA with his daughter, Amina." The words hung in the air like thunder. Nia stared at the papers, her heart pounding. Slowly, she took them, reading every line until the truth became impossible to ignore. The man who had adored Amina, who had compared Nia to her every day of her life, wasn't Amina's biological father. He was hers. The next morning when he woke, she was sitting beside him, holding the documents in her lap. He saw her eyes red from crying and frowned. "What's wrong?" he asked weakly. Nia took a deep breath and handed him the papers. He read them, his hands trembling. The silence stretched long and heavy. Then he looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief and guilt. "Nia," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I didn't know. All those years I treated you." He stopped, his words breaking apart. Tears began to spill down his wrinkled cheeks. Nia reached for his hand and held it tightly. "It's okay, Dad," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything. I forgive you." He turned his face away, sobbing quietly, ashamed of the years he had wasted, the birthdays he forgot, the words he never said, the love he never gave. In that small hospital room there were no trophies, no perfect daughters, no pride. Just a dying man and the girl he had overlooked, the one who still chose to stay. And for the first time in his life, he truly saw her. Nia had stopped arguing a long time ago. When she was younger, she used to cry and ask her father, "Why do you hate me? What did I do wrong?" But as the years went by, she realized that silence hurt less than trying to explain herself. So she stopped asking. She stopped hoping. She just smiled when he compared her to Amina, the perfect sister who could do no wrong. While Amina lived off their father's money, Nia built her own life from scratch. She worked hard, saved every penny, and started a small business. At first, no one noticed. But slowly, that business grew, and so did she. Years later, Nia returned home for the first time in months. It was raining hard, thunder shaking the windows. She stepped inside, her fiancé beside her, a calm, confident man in a dark suit. He was a respected lawyer, polite and gentle, nothing like the people her father used to say she wasn't good enough to be around. Her father sat in his old chair, the TV flickering in front of him. When he saw her, he barely looked up. "What brings you here?" he asked flatly. Nia smiled. "I wanted to talk, Dad." He glanced at her fiancé, his lips curling in a smirk. "Who's this? Another man who'll leave you when he sees what you're really like." Nia didn't flinch. Her fiancé reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Actually, sir," he said calmly, placing it on the table, "I came to deliver this." Her father frowned and opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, the ownership papers for the family estate. His hands began to shake as he read. "This can't be right," he muttered. "This house. It's under Nia's name." Nia looked at him, her voice steady. "Yes. I bought it back from the bank after you lost it. You didn't know, but I've been paying the debt for years." He stared at her in shock, his pride collapsing under the weight of the truth. You own this house now." Nia's eyes softened. "No, Dad," she said gently. "I just came to return what was always mine." He looked down at the table, ashamed and speechless, but her fiancé wasn't done. He handed him another envelope, a smaller one this time. "There's something else you should see," he said quietly. Her father opened it and froze. Inside was a DNA report. It confirmed that Nia, not Amina, was his biological daughter. The man who had spent his entire life calling Nia a disappointment had rejected the only child who was truly his. Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at her. "Nia, I didn't know," he whispered. She gave him a sad smile. "I know you didn't, but I did. And I still came back." For the first time in his life, her father saw her not as a mistake, not as a failure, but as the daughter who stayed silent and still chose love over hate. The hall was packed with reporters, cameras flashing like stars. Nia stood on stage, her heart calm, her smile steady. Years ago, no one had listened when she spoke. Now the whole country waited for her words. She had become one of the most admired artists in the nation, her work displayed in museums, her story whispered in every corner. The host handed her the microphone and said, "Miss Nia, everyone wants to know what inspired you." She took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping over the sea of faces. "When I was younger," she began softly, My father used to tell me I'd never be as good as my sister. I believed him for a long time. Every time I painted, his words echoed in my head. The crowd grew quiet. But years later, she continued, her voice firming, DNA proved something he never imagined. I wasn't trying to be her. I was trying to be me. The room went silent. Then came the sound of clapping, soft at first, then louder and louder until the entire hall was filled with applause. Cameras clicked, flashes burst, and people rose to their feet. In the very last row, an old man stood alone. His hands trembled, his eyes wet with tears. He had once been the man who broke her spirit, who compared her to someone who wasn't even his child. And now, he watched the daughter he had rejected shine brighter than he ever imagined. "That's my daughter," he whispered, his voice cracking. But it was too late for apologies. The world already knew who she was, not because of his approval, but because of her strength, her art, and her quiet courage to become herself.